everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to add subjects into a digital background. We'll be using an example from my Cozy Christmas collection. This background is called All I Want for Christmas Is You. You should all have a PSD that looks like this. You'll have a folder with stock, and then we have our snow that we're going to add, the gift, and then our models. Since this is more of a beginner tutorial, we'll be going over everything, all of the small stuff that we typically will skim through in the advanced tutorials, like extracting our models. We're going to do all of that today. So what I'm going to do is see if my select and subject will do a good job. Now the flower I'm not worried about because that I am going to mask off. You can keep the flower if you like, but I know, let me go back. For the original, I just got rid of it because it just didn't quite fit. But you could add anything else also. You could add a big candy cane or maybe a more Christmassy type flower. So I'm going to click on my plus with my quick selection here and just get, now even this probably doesn't matter much because I'm sure I'll be masking their feet into the snow. So I won't try to be too perfect with it, but I'll just grab what I can. And areas like this, we could try to subtract, but most of the time I'm going to end up just having to mask it anyway. But we'll go through and see. See, it just wants to do too much. So it's going to be easier for me to just brush that off with a black brush. All right, I think that is pretty good. So what I like to do is just make a copy, Control or Command J, and then I'll turn off this background one here. And again, I'll zoom in just to make sure I have everything. All right, that's pretty good. So now I will hold down my Control or Command key while I click on the layer, and then we'll go to Select and Mask. And then I will just use my Refine Edge brush and go around any edges. It did a pretty good job with her hair. I don't even think I want to, actually just for the heck of it, let's go over and see if it does anything better. No, I think it's pretty good like it is. So that was just luck. Normally you're not going to get the hair that well. I can also try this here, but again, it's probably just going to make it super fuzzy and I'll have to mask it anyway. That's not bad. Let's try it over here. So yeah, not the greatest. I'm actually just going to go ahead and go backwards because it did get rid of, like, see here. Let me zoom in. See how it's kind of getting fuzzy and taking off some of that I don't want it to. That's why I say masking is typically the best, just to make sure you have full control and get it how you like. But these tools, obviously the Select Subject and the Refine Edge, they're good at, getting you started and saving you some time that way. So this looks pretty good. I would normally shift the edge a little, but I don't even think we need to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now if you prefer, you can come down to your output settings and choose however you want to output it. I don't know. This is just part of my workflow that I always just click OK and then make a copy. And then I turn off the background one. Sometimes I'll keep it. Sometimes I'll delete it. I think for today I'll delete it just so we don't have so many layers. And I'll also delete the model so I don't get you guys too confused. All right, so now I'm just going to start at the top and I'll put a layer mask on this. I'll get my black brush. If you don't have the black in the foreground, just hit the X key. And if you don't have black and white here, if you have some other color, just hit D. And that will bring up the black and white. And then, like I said, I'm going to hit B, the letter B for brush, to bring up my brushes. I'll go ahead and get a hard brush. And I'm going to go through and just mask off everything that I need to get rid of. You can see a little bit of her arm here that is transparent, where probably the quick selection grabbed a little bit too much. So that is why it is good to keep a backup copy. I know I just literally just said I deleted mine, but if you had the backup copy, you could just invert it and brush it right back on from the original. And that's one thing I want you guys to keep in mind too. I mean, I make mistakes all the time, and it's really important to understand that you can fix your mistakes and you don't have to start all over again. Like in the beginning, if I made a mistake like that, I would have started all over again, selected my subject, did the refine edge again. But there's always a way to fix your mistakes, no matter how far in you are, no matter if you flattened your layers or not. And that'll just come with, experience and practice. Because no matter, how experienced or skilled you get, you're always going to make mistakes. I don't know any artist who ever creates work and, it just is 100% perfect from start to finish without any mistakes or anything like that. It just comes with it. So learn to accept it and that it's okay, and just know that you can always go back and fix it. To make some of these straight lines go a bit quicker, what I like to do is kind of lay down my first mark and then hold down the shift key and click, and it'll give me a straight line, and it just makes things go a little quicker sometimes. It doesn't work as well around the edges, but if you have a good straight line to follow, that's something you want to try out. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to go ahead and right click and apply the layer mask. And then I'll do Control or Command T to grab the subjects and just sort of position them a little bit more of where I'm going to want them. Now you can put them up here on the stoop if you want, but I'm going to put them down here because I think it makes it a little more complicated, so we can practice, a little bit more with masking in and things like that. All right, now for lighting purposes, our lighting on our subjects is coming in from this way, but we would have the strongest lighting coming in from the store window. So I'm going to do Control or Command T and flip them horizontal. All right, so now that we have our subjects, let's go ahead and open up our gift. I'm going to turn the subjects off for now, just so we can focus on the gift only. So again, we're going to go to Select and Subject. And I'm going to do Control or Command J to make a copy of that and turn off the background one. And on the top one, I'm going to double click on the side of the layer. And we're going to go to this handlebar here and hold down the Alt or Option key to split them. And just drag it to the left. I think I'll go to about here. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and grab the gift and I'm going to flip it horizontal. And now is when we can go ahead and turn our models back on so we can see exactly where we want to put this gift. And I always like to mask things behind other things in the image, and that will just help to make it look a little bit more realistic. So as you can see, there's some snow here. So I'm going to put it about right here, and then we will mask it in behind that snow. To do that, I like to lower the opacity so I can see through, and you can mask it, or you could also just come to the background layer, grab your quick selection tool and make sure you're on the plus and go ahead and grab that snow and then make a copy of it. So Control or Command J, and you could just drag it on top of the gift. And I'll go ahead and turn this back on. Now we put it in front of our models too, so we could go ahead and bring our model up and she'll cover that up. And then I'll bring the opacity on the gift back up, and then you could see you have your snow there. So it's up to you. You could do it that way, or like I said, you could just mask it. So for the masking method, you want to lower the opacity where you can see through, get your black brush. Actually, for this one, I could just lower it all the way because I know that I need all of this. And you can use a soft round brush or a blending brush, whatever you like. So you're not going to see a difference because, like I said, I have that gift lowered all the way in the opacity. But if I turn it back on, now you can see. And I think I'll just turn it a little. All right, so let's come to the model layer, and we're going to start our first adjustment for the lighting. So for that, we're going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. Oh, I see some of our flower here that I need to mask off. But we're going to go ahead and bring down the highlights. I'll go to about right here. And then we're going to take our whites down as well. And then I'm going to warm my subjects up just a little. I'll take the exposure down a touch, and then I'll go ahead and click OK. All right, so that is our first adjustment. The next one I'm going to do is more for color tones. So we're going to come to the background, make a copy, Control or Command J. I'll drag it up above my subjects, and you guys can go ahead and name these layers if you want, but often I merge so many times that my names will get changed. But if that's something that helps you keep everything organized, go ahead and do that. I will do that for now, but as I said, they'll most likely get changed once I merge. All right, so now with this background layer we have covering up our subject, we're going to hold down the Alt or Option key and hover right here, and this little box and arrow will pop up, and then you'll just go ahead and click, and it will clip it down to the subject. Then we're going to go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to blur this all the way out. And then I will change the blend mode, and I think soft light is probably going to work best. Sometimes I'll try color if it's a really monochrome type of a background, but typically I will use soft light. Now I'm just going to go ahead and lower the opacity on this, and we'll turn that off and on so we can see that. I'm going to come back to my model and put a mask on it and just get rid of that flower real quick. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and merge these. As I said, it's going to change the name to whatever the top layer is. As you can see, you guys don't have to merge as much as I do, but on some of these steps it is just helpful to have it all on one layer, especially if you make an adjustment that you know you don't need to go back and change. Now I'm going to see if I can warp her hand downward so that it's not quite sticking out there, and if not, we can very easily just mask her hand off and it will still look realistic or natural. So we're going to go to Edit and Puppet Warp, and I'll just put a little thumbtack in all the areas that I don't want to move, and you just click to do that. The reason I'm not using warp or distort on this is because it will make her hand look blurry, and it's just not going to give us a natural look. If you're confused on what I'm speaking about, try it and give it a try, and then you'll see, you'll understand a bit more. Let's see if that looks good from far away. Actually, I think that's pretty cute. I think in the original, yeah, I just got rid of it in the original, but it's up to you guys if you want to leave it or erase it. Again, some of you may want to even add something in there, like I said, a candy cane or, you know, whatever you think will be cute. So now I'm going to do a little bit more lighting work. So we're going to go to Brightness and Contrast and clip this down. And I'm just going to bring my brightness down a bit. Then on the layer mask with a soft white brush, or black brush, I'm sorry, I will bring some of that back. And I'm going to start over here on the edges closest to the light source. I'm going to lower the opacity as I get more towards the bottom of my subject, as there wouldn't be that much light down here. And then I will zoom in because obviously we always want our subject's faces to be lit. So I'm not going to leave it at full exposure, but I do want to bring a little bit more of that exposure back. I'm going to go about 58. Between 50 and 60 will probably be good, depending on how much of that brightness you took out. I'm not necessarily dodging here, I'm just kind of dotting it around a bit, and we'll see what it looks like. I'm going to go over her hand as well. All right, so I'm going to lower the opacity even more. I'm at about 30%, and I'm going to go over her face as well. Now I'm going back with my black brush just because I don't quite want that much on her hat. Now I noticed some of you guys, this may seem like they're very underexposed, but this is actually a really good point here of exposure for this image because we're going to come in with our dodge, and that's what's really going to make the features pop. So while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of work for his eyes. So I'm going to do a curves adjustment, and I'll clip it down, and I'm going to bring my midpoint up, invert that, and I'm just going to dodge the light parts of his eyes. I'll go ahead and put my brush back at 100. And then I'll lower the opacity and get some of the details. I'm going to lower it even more and go up the bridge of the nose and across the forehead. I'll hit the cheekbones, just kind of giving it a broad dodge right now. And then I'll go ahead and get a little bit of her cheek also. And I'll get a bit of the hair and hat while we're here. We're going to be doing a lot more of this later, but you guys know I like to go in small steps. So just get a little bit of it while we're here. All right, let me go ahead and zoom out. And that's a bit much on his eyes, the center of his eyes. So I'm going to take a brush about 40% black and brush some of that off. All right, now just for my own purposes, I'm going to make a copy of the models because I want to come back and forth and see the before and after of these adjustments. So I'm merging, actually let me show you in case you don't know how. So I'm going to merge the model with the adjustments we made. So to do that, I'm clicked on this layer, and then I'm going to hold down my shift key while I come to the top layer, and then Control or Command E, and that will merge it. So now I can turn it off and on and see where my adjustments are. So I think at this point, I'm going to go ahead and mask his leg behind the snow. So we want to turn the opacity down. Or as I said before, you can just make a copy. You can come to the background and make a selection of this and just drag it on top. But sometimes I don't want to include the whole thing, and it's just easier for me to see when I'm painting it in, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put a mask on this, and I'm going to get a brush at about maybe 90% in my hardness, and then I will zoom in and just mask his leg off. But you want to make sure that you do have him in the right position that you want him in, because once you mask, you've already erased some of the model, and you can always go back and add it back in, but it's just easier if you can to make sure it's as close as possible to where you want to keep it. Whoops, we definitely want our brush at 100, so I'll go ahead and raise that up. All right, so actually I think I want to mask some of this over here. So I'm gonna go ahead, like I said, sometimes you're gonna find that you have to move them, and that's okay. You can always remask. Luckily, because I just want to move him down, I don't have to do anything then add a little more masking. So I don't have to go back with a white brush, just the black one. And again, this is a good place to use a blending brush if you have one, and I do think we have some in the free section. But the round brush works as well. All right, that is pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and apply that layer mask, and we are going to start changing the colors on our model's clothing. So for that, we're going to need a bunch of solid color layers, but the easy thing is we can just grab one. So I'll grab one, maybe in a reddish tone here. And for blend mode, we may use soft light and color, but for now I'm just going to set it to soft light and then invert it, Control or Command I, and make sure you're clicked on the layer mask to invert. And then instead of doing that whole process again by grabbing more solid color layers, I'm just going to make some copies. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies here. So I'll come to the next one and double click, and now I can just change the color, and I already have my layer mask on. I have it inverted. So now all I have to do is come to each of these layers, double click, and choose a color. And I'm not even sure if these are the exact colors that I'm going to use, but for now I'm just kind of choosing something. And these other two I'm going to hold off on. We'll grab those if we need them in a little bit. So I think that I want to make his jacket. We can go off of the original or we can just do our own thing. So in the original, I kind of had them matching. They both have these rust colored, I guess, reds in here and then some greens. So we can kind of go off of that, but if we want, if you guys want, just do whatever colors you're feeling. So this is, to some people, maybe a tedious part. I love this part. I like to just sit back and maybe listen to something, watch a TV show. This is where I really like to get out my tablet and paint. So this is just a good relaxing way to zone out if you want, but I'm gonna just kind of sit here and go through and do this, and all I'm doing is just painting it on. And if you guys have a tablet, that'll help you go a bit faster, and personally to me it's just more fun. But yeah, I'll just maybe throw on some relaxing music for you guys, or mute it and put on your own. And we'll just go through and paint this jacket, and then I'll go ahead and do her lower jacket like in the original. And don't forget, if you accidentally mess up and go too far, you can always go back with a black brush and erase it. But also, to make this easier, we can just hover here. So I'll click on this layer and hold down my Alter option to clip it down. So now when I'm brushing, I don't have to, I can go off of the edge and I don't have to worry about that. Obviously over here, we'll have to be careful, but on the outer edges, we can just be as messy as we want if we clip it down. Now for these buttonholes, I think I'm going to lower the opacity down and then get a black brush and kind of bring a little bit of that original color back just for a bit of dimension. Actually, maybe I'll go up a little higher. So I think I'm going to use this color for his shoes as well. So I'll come down here and brush it on to the upper part of the shoes. We'll leave the soles the same color. And then we'll move on to her jacket. Now her jacket is not as dark as his, so hers is not going to take as much color. So actually what I'm thinking, let me go back. We'll do our own separate layer for her jacket, and then that way we can double up on it. And I'll show you what I mean after we brush it on. But for now, let me just double click and make sure I've got the right color chosen. And then, actually that's pretty dark, but let's brush it on and see. All right, let me brighten it just a little, maybe about like that. I'll go ahead and brush that on. And again, I just did the lower part on this image, and I think that's what I'll do again today. I like how that looks. Let me go ahead and lower or bring the opacity up, because as you can see, if you don't have the opacity all the way up, you'll be able to see the overlap where you brushed over things, and we want it to be all nice and solid. So I do want to keep the original button color, but it's easier to just brush over it and then mask it back off. For me anyways. So we do want to be a little careful around the hair. And as I get closer here in a minute, I'll get a softer brush. And that'll help just kind of blend it in so we don't have really harsh lines. Alright, so I'll go ahead and bring the hardness down on my brush and just kind of go around these other areas. Some of it will get on the hair, and if you want to be super meticulous, you can certainly zoom in there super close like this, pixel by pixel, and erase off of the strands. Maybe I'll just do this one, but yeah, I'm not gonna go through and do that to all of them because this is actually not bad. Having a hard time telling if this is hair or her jacket, but because it's so hard for me to tell up close, it probably isn't even noticeable from far away, as you can see. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and add some of this to her hat. Alright, so I'm going to make another copy of this background, Controller Command J. I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key to clip it down. And I like the doubled up effect on her jacket here, but not her hat. So I'll just get my black brush and take it off of her hat. And then we'll come to our green layer and I'll hold down the Alt or Option, and I'm going to use this for his pants. I'm going to go ahead and make my brush about 90% hard again and come around the little details. I'm going to double click on this layer and make it green as well. And we will use that for her clothing. So I'm going to use this on her hat first. And then I'm going to use it over here on this strap. And then I will use it on her belt. Okay, and then I think this last layer, this last color layer, I'm going to use for her stockings here, and you can use any color. So I have red, maybe I'll stick with that and then just see what I think. But I'm going to lower the opacity, and I'm just going to kind of go over the roses, and I'm definitely don't want them to be too bright, so I'm just going to lower the opacity. And I'll just come in and go over these. And because these are so far away, you really don't have to be perfect. You could even use any brush that you have. Maybe you have a flower brush, or I mean, you could add anything on here really, candy canes, whatever you want. But I'm just going off of what's already here. And I'm just going to kind of lightly go over these. And then we'll zoom out and see what it looks like. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and lower the opacity on that a little more. And then I also noticed that there were polka dots on her skirt, so I think maybe I'll go back to my green layer and go over the polka dots with that. I'm just kind of adding a few of my own up here because there aren't any and I just want it to be even a little bit. So now I'm going to go ahead and merge these all to my subject so I can turn it off and on. And again, we can see where we've come so far. I think we will move on to the gift and start doing a little bit of adjusting for that. So I'm going to take this into Camera Raw Filter and bring down the highlights. Also, I will bring down the exposure a bit. And the contrast. And then like we did with our subjects, we're going to make a copy of the background and bring it above. Hold down the Alter Option key to clip it down and filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Blur it all the way out. And then we'll set our blend mode to soft light. And then I'll get my brightness and contrast and clip that down. And just bring my brightness down. I'll go on the layer mask with a soft black brush and bring back some of the highlight. All right, I'm going to go ahead and merge this together, and then I'm going to put a mask on it and zoom in to the ribbons and just take out what we don't need. So all of that right there we don't need. Let me get a hard brush. And then this little area we don't need. Just kind of going over if there's any of these white lines that can happen when you're cutting out stock. I'm just going over those. And I'm going to go ahead and take off all of this right here. And then I'll make my brush small and get any of these little areas. I'm just going to take off this entire... Oh, I see what happened. Uh-oh. Okay, so I left part of the gift. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the backup one that I had. And, oh, I see why. Okay. So it's blown out there. I knew that this was a different gift than I used in the original. But I think before we make our selection... if we bring down the highlights, that might help. But since I've already done this, as we were talking about earlier with mistakes, I'm going to just figure out a way to fix this. So obviously from far away, you really can't tell. And if I turn my subjects on, I could even push the gift behind my subject a little bit more. Let's do that and see what it looks like. That would work as well. And we would just have to remask that or bring that extra copy up like I was showing you the other method. But I think what I'm going to do is take my lasso tool and make a selections, but I want this down at 0 from my feather, and I'm just going to select some of this part here, and then I will make a copy, Control or Command J, and I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to put it behind. So I'm going to drag it down behind the gift. And then from here, I'll just use my distort and warp and things like that and get it into position where we can just kind of fake that we have the rest of the present in there. All right, I think that's pretty good. And so I'll just make a copy of that and put it and bring it over here. Maybe flip it around. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go on this layer mask here and get my black brush, make sure that it's hard, And just keep cleaning some of this up. I don't really think I need this. This is the area that showed me where I made that mistake. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and merge these together, the gift and the little parts that I added, and then I'll put another mask on this. And with a low opacity, soft black brush, I am going to erase some of the inner parts here where the white is, and we'll just make it look a little more transparent. So I'll just go slowly through here and just brush some of this off. And I'll probably keep zooming out and then zooming back in so I can see what it looks like. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and use my curves and clip this down and bring the midpoint down. And then on the layer mask, I'll use my black brush and just bring some of the highlight back again. I'm going to lower the opacity for the areas that are on this side. Alright, so now I'm going to come to the background and I'm going to get my brightness and contrast and bring my brightness down, and I'm going to darken this little area of snow here by the gift. Make sure my brush is at 100. I want to bring a little bit of highlight back, so I'm just going to lower the opacity with my black brush and bring a little back. And then I'm going to go back to that adjustment on the box and keep working on that. I want to just blend it a little bit more, bring a little bit more of the light back. I'm going to come back to my models and I'm going to get a curves layer and clip it down. Bring the midpoint down, invert it, and I'm just going to brush some more shadow on this side. Oh, let me put my brush back at 100. And then I'm just going to take this and lower the opacity and do a bit of dodging, or I'm sorry, burning on the subjects and their clothes. Now I'll lower the opacity and come in and do some of the features on the face. And as you guys can see, I like to go back and forth on the opacity when I'm dodging and burning. So I think I did a little too much on her arm. I'm going to go in with the black brush and just erase some of that. So I'm going to put the opacity back up. And then I'm going to get my curves and bring my midpoint up and clip it down, and I'll go in and do a little more dodging. I'm going to go back to my burn and do a little bit on his fingers. I'm going to bring the opacity up. And then I'm just lowering the opacity and blending a little bit of that off. So now I'll go back to my dodge and finish up with that. I'm going to lower the opacity on this a bit, and then I'll go ahead and merge that and we'll see where we're at. All right. I'm going to add some shadows under their feet. So I'm going to go to solid color and I'm going to choose, I can know my shadows are kind of a dark purple color in this image. So I'll choose something like this, and then if we need to change it later, we will. So I'm going to invert that and get a brush. I'm going to get a soft brush and I'm just going to tilt it like so, and we'll just brush some shadows right underneath their feet. So I'm going to put my brush to about 70% at first. All right, so I definitely want this darker and less saturated. So I'm going to bring it down like this. And then I'll bring my brush up and I'm going to be more specific with my shadows and make my brush a little smaller. And just go right underneath their feet. And then I will get my black brush, put it back to normal, and I'm just going to brush it off of the snow. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to my subjects. I'm going to get a blank layer and set it to soft light. I'm going to hold down the alter option to clip it down, and I'm going to get a gradient. You can go into your basics and get a white to black, but I'm going to change the white to more of a skin color and click OK. And then I'm just going to brush from the right top down to the left bottom. And then I'll lower the opacity, and that'll just give us a nice gradient where the lighting gets a little darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. Actually, I'm going to go back in here. I think instead of black, I'm going to choose with the eyedropper. So let me show you again. So you double click here, and then the eyedropper will pop up, and I'm going to choose from the color in the image just like I did for the highlight part. And then you just rebrush it back on. Okay, so now I'm going to go to, we're going to do another gradient. I'm going to go to layer, new fill layer, and gradient, and I'm going to set it to soft light. Click OK. I'm going to do radial and reverse. And then I'll click up here in the gradient and we'll choose our colors. So over here on the left, I'm going to choose from the image, which we had. Actually, I kind of want to go with something warmer. So maybe I'll go into the oranges or the reds and choose something like that. And then over here on the right, I'm going to choose bright and warm because this color will affect all of our lighter parts. And then I'll just lower the opacity on that. And then we'll come down to our gift and we'll add the shadow underneath. And we're just going to do it the same way. So I'm going to do a solid color layer, and we chose sort of a purple tone. And then invert it and flatten our brush. And again, I'm going to lower the opacity and do the larger shadow, and then I'll bring the opacity up and do the smaller one. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and group all of this so far and just kind of see where I'm at. Kind of want to turn on the snow now just to see what that will look like. And with the snow, you guys can adjust it however you like. So if you want to make it larger, smaller, add a motion blur, a path blur. If you want to put a mask on it and take off some areas, lower the opacity, which I'm probably going to do in a second. But for now, I'm just taking it off some of the areas that it's a little much. Let me lower the opacity. And another tip for this is if you do a global adjustment like a gradient, it will work. The snow will look a lot better if you put it underneath that adjustment. So I just drug the gradient on top. That way it's not too bright and it kind of matches more with our global adjustments. And I think I'm also going to put a gradient on it, or I'm sorry, a brightness and contrast adjustment, and go on my mask with the black brush and just take it off the center. So I just basically wanted to darken the edges. And you can also take this into Camera Raw Filter and add a vignette to do that if you like. All right, so at this point, I want to flatten. So before you flatten, you should always save your layers. So you would just go to File, Save As, and save it as a PSD or Photoshop document, wherever you want to save it. And then I'm going to go ahead and flatten this. And I'm going to make a copy and I'm going to take it into Camera Raw Filter. All right, so I just want to bring up my blacks and shadows a bit. I'm also going to warm it a touch. And I'm going to bring the texture out a little, and then I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to do another gradient. So we're going to get our blank layer and we're going to go to the gradient tool. Click up in here. Again, I think I'm going to stick with warm tones, but we can always change that. I'm going to set the blend mode to soft light and just drag out probably from the top to the bottom, but you can try out all different ways. So basically wherever you want your brightest point, that's where you want to drag. So if I wanted my brightest point over here, then I would drag from that way. If I wanted it on this side, then I drag that way. And I want a little more of the brightness coming down and the darkness kind of starting lower down here. Right now it starts about in the middle. So to do that, I'm going to click in here and I'm going to drag this point over, and you can see it's moving my brightness over more. So now I'll have more of the image brightened. And then I'm just going to lower the opacity. And I'm going to do another pass of dodge. So I'm going to bring my midpoint up, invert it, and come on in and just dodge a bit. Now, as you can see, this particular background does have a painterly filter over it. And even though our subjects blend in and look great in the image without that, I know some of you guys may want to add that to your subjects. So if you can, I know some of you don't have the graphics processor to use that filter, but if you can, what I do is go ahead and flatten, and then I'll make a copy and go to Filter, Stylize, Oil Paint. And you basically just want to zoom in and play around with the settings until you get a similar effect. Of course, this is going to put the effect over the whole image, but we'll just invert it and brush it only onto our subjects. Or you could have done this before you flatten as well. That's something else to keep in mind. All right, so I'll just go about to here for now, and then I will invert it and brush it on only the subjects. Again, this would work better before you flattened it, especially with that snow, but just in case, this is how you do it if you want to do it. Oh, I guess I should put my brush all the way back up to 100. I typically don't brush this over the eyes of my subjects because it just makes them look not as sharp. So I will avoid the eyes. All right, and then I think I just want a little bit more brightness in here. So I'm just gonna do a curves layer to brighten it up a bit, and that is it. So let's go ahead and have a look at our before and our after. So I hope that was helpful for you guys, not just for this image, but to give you a little idea of all the little things you can do to make your subjects blend into any background.
I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and thanks for watching.